Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir. I'm one of your co-hosts, and joining me as always is our other co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It's Season 3, Episode 58 already. The NFL season is entering its final quarter, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are about to enter theirs with an interesting matchup against the Oakland Raiders, and we'll get into that matchup, of course. But first thing to do, of course, is check out the injury report. For the Steelers, James Conner had been ruled out of this game long ago, so it looks like it could be a week-to-week injury. If you want to speculate, Austin, do you think he's going to play next week either?
No, I don't think so. I think he's out at least until the week after that, so I do not think he will play next week. How about you?
I don't think so either. I'm kind of concerned because a week-to-week injury at this time of the year is not very good, especially when you have the high level of competition coming to Pittsburgh that you might expect. I'd expect him back before the end of the season, but I'm concerned. That looked a lot like a high ankle sprain when I first saw it, even though I know that's not what it was. Morgan Burnett. Go ahead.
I mean, it is a high ankle sprain now, or isn't it? It's not a high ankle, just an ankle sprain.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor. I don't know the difference between them, but I remember a few years ago Ben Roethlisberger had a high ankle sprain. He really was just never quite the same player that year as far as his mobility goes. Of course, him being him, he tried playing on it the very next week too. For a running back that cuts and needs that, I would expect him to need to miss at least 1 to 2 games at the minimum. So time will tell.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Offensive tackle Marcus Gilbert did not practice at all this week. It looks like he's going to miss yet another week. What is going on with him? Are these the final days for Marcus Gilbert as a Steeler?
Maybe. Seems like a mistake not to put him on IR. Now look back, it looks like I was down for quite a while now, but it's going to be interesting to see if he returns it, because it's getting to the point where it's like, is he even going to make it back? Because, I mean, he was expected to practice last week, according to Tomlin, and he didn't. So, and now we're this week, he didn't practice at all. So it's interesting. It seems like the Steelers kind of messed up where they should have put him on IR, so they had the extra raw spot. But it is what it is, I suppose. And your question might be. I'm not, obviously, Myler stepped in fine. Chukwuma Okorafor is developing still. And he did fine against the Broncos, which, I mean, he did give up one, but like that was against Butler. So like, what are you gonna do? I feel like it might be the end of Chris Gilbert, especially because he's much more expensive than Filer and Chukwuma Okorafor.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to justify keeping someone that's missed as many games as he's missed over the past few years. It is interesting, though. I wonder if Gilbert suffered some sort of setback and injury, because it is an ankle injury, right?
It's a knee.
It's a knee injury. Okay, well I don't know. It's certainly something that the Steelers haven't exactly elaborated on. We've only heard small things, kind of like you said, like he was supposed to be back last week, and then this week passes and we haven't heard much. So I think with each passing week it becomes more and more likely that he gets cut before going into next season. Morgan Burnett practiced in full all week, so it looks like he's going to be good to go. Kind of an important game for him to be back because, as I'm sure you remember, he was signed to be the guy that kind of follows the tight end, covers as like the strong safety guy. And he's going to have a difficult test ahead of him with Jared Cook. Do you think Burnett's going to be up to the challenge?
I think Burnett could handle it. He's seen Jared Cook quite a few times, so I think he could handle it.
And then on the Raiders side, Doug Martin and Jordy Nelson both practiced in full. We have a handful of injuries on the offensive line and defensive line. Gabe Jackson with a knee and ankle injury. Rodney Hudson with an ankle and knee injury. Maurice Hurst with an ankle injury. Arden Key, the rookie, with a knee injury. Same with Maurice Hurst, another rookie. How do you say that name? Kalichi Osmiel?
Osmeli.
Osmeli.
Kalichi Osmeli.
With the toe injury.
Yep.
Defensive lineman Frosty Rucker with a neck injury, and Daryl Worley with a shoulder injury. That's a lot of players right there. They've really just been banged up this year. On top of just being a bad football team, they've been just crushed with injuries too. It has not been a banner year for the Oakland Raiders.
Oh, not at all. I mean, at least some of these guys that they're off, they don't have a designation. Like Frosty Rucker, he had that injury. He doesn't have a designation going into the game. Also, Jordy Nelson doesn't have a designation, as well as Gabe Jack, Arden Key, and then Rodney Hudson don't have nations. The only ones that everyone that the Raiders have that didn't that struggled in the week are questionable, and that is Maurice Hurst, who didn't practice Friday. I mean, I didn't see that. That's an interesting one, especially with how big Maurice Hurst is to that defense. Doug Martin is another one with a questionable tag. Then Kalichi Osmeli, like you said, questionable. And then Kyle Wilbur, Daryl Worley, and Seth Roberts, all questionable. So, I mean, really have been decimated. They obviously Martavis Bryant earlier in the year. They lost Brandon LaFell, I believe, the next week. Then they lost Lynch early on, and he's not coming back. They lost Donald Penn, who just got activated this week. They've been very, very unfortunate with injuries. I mean, they're a bad team regardless, but still.
So, a little bit about the Steelers and Raiders, one of the oldest franchises or the oldest rivalries in the AFC. The Steelers and Raiders have played each other combined 28 times. The Raiders lead that series 15-13. The last game you might remember came back in 2015. The Steelers won that game 38-35 on a last-second field goal from Chris Boswell. Antonio Brown set a team record with 17 catches for 284 yards on the day. D'Angelo Williams had an outstanding day himself, running for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was the last win for the Steelers, which means their win streak is a win-1 right now. Both teams have an even 3-3 record in the postseason against each other. And a fun fact, the Steelers' most recent win in Oakland came in 1995, and it could be the last time the Steelers play in Oakland for quite a long time, with the Raiders set to move to Las Vegas in the near future. A lot is on the line as far as history goes. The Steelers have lost 3 straight games in Oakland in 2006, 2012, and 2013. The last game in Oakland yielded a record touchdown run by Terrell Pryor on the game's first play from scrimmage, too. But let's circle back a little bit to that last matchup in 2015. The Raiders were an up-and-coming squad, the whole AC/DC connection with Amari Cooper and Derek Carr, the great offensive line, a young defense led by Khalil Mack. They were thought to be, in 2015 and 16, potential challengers to the Patriots as one of the best teams in the AFC. You know, the unfortunate broken leg by Derek Carr before the playoffs, and they never really rebounded. They struggled last year. They got their coach Jack Del Rio fired, and then they turn around, hire John Gruden. Then you have that saga with Khalil Mack trading him away. You have Amari Cooper getting traded away. You have this rash of injuries and just the complete struggles of the team. What happened to this Oakland Raiders squad that we thought was going to be a dark horse for a Super Bowl appearance a couple years ago?
Yeah, they didn't turn out to be what we expected them to be this season. After they kind of fell right apart, just kind of bad for the Raiders. They just didn't repeat the success that they had a year prior.
And there's not a single thing about it that necessarily stands out other than perhaps the way that the Raiders handled their coaching search this offseason. I know it's only 1 year, but what do you think about the John Gruden experiment so far?
Oh, it is, and it's failing miserably. Only 9 more years, Raiders fans.
And with that, let's get into the game. So you've seen how the stats and everything stack up against each other, Austin. When the Steelers are on offense, we already know about the Raiders' depleted defense, especially minus Khalil Mack. It's not really looking good for them. What kind of challenges does the Raiders' defense pose to the Pittsburgh Steelers' offense, if any?
Well, it's really not much. Of all the active Oakland Raiders players, they have 7 sacks combined. T.J. Watt has more himself. Of course, you may be saying, Austin, the Raiders have 10 sacks. It says so on NFL. And yeah, that's true. But Bruce Irvin has 3 of them, and they cut him. So now they literally have one good player, and that's first round. I'm sorry, he's not first round pick. He was a projected first round pick, Maurice Hurst, who actually fell to the 5th round in the draft due to injury concern. But he has 4 sacks on the year. And then there are only 3 other players on the Raiders that have a sack on the year. And I'm really curious to know how this stood up with history, because to me, that looked like it was historically bad. And basically, if you count all the sacks from the year at 10, that's what they have. They are still 9 behind the Giants and Patriots, who are tied for the second worst team at 19. I looked it up, and the fewest sacks in the season is 11. So the Raiders can be historically worse if they don't get another sack. More than likely, I think they're going to either tie the record or tie for second least sacks in the season, which is 12. I believe 2 other teams are tied for that. So anyway, the Steelers' offensive line at their caliber play shouldn't allow Ben to be touched this game. More than 2 quarterback hits in this game is going to be it's a bad game for the offensive line. I know that's high standards, but really with how bad the Raiders' pass rush is, that's where the line should be. With little pressure, I expect Ben to be dealing all afternoon. The Raiders' defense has been very bad against the rush, giving up over 150 yards per game, currently ranking 31st in the league, while on the other side, they've been much better against the pass statistically, ranking 14th. But the key word here is statistically, because teams have found out so much success running on them, they don't try throwing as often, meaning they give up pass yards. So I'm not sold on Oakland being the 4th best pass defense, so I'm going to encourage focusing on the pass in this game without James Conner in the lineup. Obviously, don't abandon the run. I don't think that's a good idea. I think there needs to be faith in Samuels and Ridley, especially against this bad of defense. But I just got a feeling one of them, Ridley, is going to have a bad fumble here. Thinking of those 2 guys, though, I'm thinking Ridley is going to be the main running back in this one. He's going to get more of the rushes, as he's a proven veteran, but I think Samuels is in for a huge pass-catching day, as he's a better pass catcher 100% in my mind. He was used as a tight end at North Carolina State, so that should be telling enough. I'm sorry, at C-State, South Carolina. But anyhow, overall, I think they will do fine, even being the backups. All that matters is the offensive line is blocking for them. It's one of the worst rushing defenses, so it's going to be very tough for Samuels and Ridley to have a bad day here. But let's talk about receivers next, though. The last time these 2 teams versed in 2015, AB84 single-handedly destroyed the Raiders, and despite AB slowing down slightly since then, I think the Raiders are only worse off now than they were then, especially because the Steelers have Juju now. Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to double-team AB84 the entire game and go with the Broncos ideology of just letting Juju tear them apart, or do they leave linebackers matched up with Vance McDonald? Like, I really don't see how the Steelers don't destroy on offense. I don't see a single place where the Raiders have an advantage. I didn't even talk about Ryan Switzer yet either. I always love players in revenge games, always. And he's clear to play, so add even more incentive for him to do good in this game, to get those catches. Then James Washington has reportedly got 2 really good weeks of practice in after that bad Broncos game, so maybe look for him to finally get going, but don't get your hopes up, though. I definitely won't be. And that really leaves the tight ends, and for some reason, I got a feeling they're mostly going to be ignored this game. They've all been pretty quiet the past few weeks, and with how the receiver and running back matchups stack up, I just don't see the tight ends being involved all too much, personally. But what do you see about the offense going in? Are they going to have a struggle at all anywhere?
I really don't think so. I mean, this has the potential, if everything is firing on all cylinders, to be a historical outburst by the offense. The Raiders have, in my opinion, by far the worst defense collectively the Steelers have faced this season. True, the Buccaneers and Chiefs have had bad defenses as well, but they've at least had some individual standouts on their respective units, like Quan Alexander, Gerald McCoy on Tampa Bay, D Ford, Justin Houston. I don't think Justin Houston played, but you get my point. The Chiefs had at least a couple players that are at least guys that you might know. The Raiders have, like, nobody. One guy that you might have heard of besides Hurst, who has the 4 sacks this year, is Tahir Whitehead. And it's not really because he's eye-popping. It's just mostly because he leads the team in a lot of different statistical categories because he's been on the field all year. Obviously, this was a bad defense before they traded Khalil Mack and cut Bruce Irvin. We know that. But now that they've parted ways with them, this has become an even worse front seven than it already was, and that's really saying something. They're the league's second worst defense in stopping the run, and they're last in the league in sacks by a wide margin, as Austin pointed out. Their front four is really unimpressive, featuring the washed Frosty Rucker, a rotational guy in Maurice Hurst, who is talented, but still only has 4 sacks and is leading the team. A run stopper in Jonathan Hankins, who's not stopping the run well. He's past his prime. And another rookie in Arden Key, who's not really a pass-rushing specialist per se. I would honestly feel comfortable in this game if Zach Banner and Chukwuma Okorafor had to play a large snap percentage. The Raiders' front has been awful. They can't do anything to stop the run, fill gaps, and outside of Hurst, they haven't been doing anything to get after the quarterback. The starting 5 offensive linemen minus Marcus Gilbert again should have no problem handling their business, and when you consider how well they played for the most part against 2 tough defensive fronts in the Denver Broncos and Los Angeles Chargers, I really don't see any reason why they shouldn't have a big game. The only reason Ben Roethlisberger could be hit in this game is because the Raiders call multiple 8-man blitzes, or because he holds onto the ball for 5+ seconds, like we know he might have a tendency to do when he knows he's going to have a lot of time to throw the football. I think it could be a big game for these guys. And on the ground, it'll be kind of interesting to monitor. We really haven't seen the Steelers' depth at running back tested like this since the 2015, this is kind of unfortunate, but the 2015 and 2014 playoffs. Obviously, nobody expected Bell to sit out the whole season. Now James Conner, his backup, was out. So now you're going to the number 3 running back in Stephen Ridley and Jalen Samuels. And it's going to be interesting. We haven't really seen the by-committee approach to the running back position with Mike Tomlin for years. It's been a long time. And I expect to see, as you mentioned, Austin, Stephen Ridley get the bulk of the carries. He's more of the prototypical running back, the downhill runner. Jalen Samuels is the jack of all trades, as we've talked about. He's going to be used on passing downs. He can run the ball. He can be a pass blocker. He can technically be a tight ended like an H-back. I think there could be a couple snaps for Trey Edmonds too, maybe. And I would not be surprised to see Ryan Switzer in the backfield at all. I wouldn't expect any of these guys to surpass 20 touches in this game, and I hope we see a nice balanced distribution that uses all of these players in different situations. I already said that I think the offensive line will have a really good game, so I see no reason why these guys shouldn't collectively rush for over 100 yards in this one. And I think that'll lead to more success in other areas. And then in the passing game, Roethlisberger should continue to put up big numbers. He's just short of 4,000 passing yards on the season. Even though the Raiders have a middle-of-the-pack passing defense, Austin, you pointed it out, that's not necessarily accurate. Teams have gotten up on them so early that they don't need to keep throwing the ball. And of course, their rush defense has been so bad, it hasn't mattered enough to throw the football in those games. The Raiders' secondary isn't awful, but it's not that good. I have to like Antonio Brown's matchup in any case here, and Ben Roethlisberger, as we know, no longer has to force things to him as much as he had to previously. Juju Smith-Schuster has been fantastic this year, and he has the most favorable matchup in my mind. And of course, you mentioned the revenge game. Ryan Switzer is going to have it on his mind. He's going to try to prove to John Gruden that trading him was a mistake, as it has looked like so far. And the tight end should have a good day as well. Vance McDonald, he's had a rough couple of games, but if the Raiders put linebackers on them, that's a mismatch. If they want to go with the safeties, then okay, go ahead, you do that. Roethlisberger will find somebody else. I mean, they don't have enough talented defensive players to keep up with the Steelers. It's really a pick your poison kind of game for the Raiders. At the end of the day, I don't see any reason why the Steelers should score less than 4 touchdowns. I fully expect 30 points on the board, and I'd be disappointed if they don't. One way to give yourself a good chance to reach that goal, obviously, don't turn the football over. And the Steelers were pretty good at that last week. They only had that one interception, which was in the red zone, but still, it was a killer, but things are trending in the right direction. The Steelers should keep it up, and if they do, they'll have a field day. Defense is a little different, though, Austin. The Oakland Raiders obviously don't have a statistically great offense, but there are good things about it that people might not realize.
Yeah, it's definitely a much different story than the defense. At least on this side of the ball, I can find where they have a good player. But the offense for the Raiders still isn't great, but they could put up points. We saw it last week against the Chiefs. They put up 33 points there. So even with their decimated roster, they can still get points if the team plays sloppily on defense. So they still their car. Still, though, the Steelers have one of the best possible matchups in terms of pass rush. The Raiders ranked 28th in the league in sacks allowed, having given up 39 on the year. And obviously, the Steelers are the best sack defense with 41. It's really funny, actually. You go back and look at, and when I was doing the research for these teams, I was looking at the bottom teams and just thought it was funny because you see the Raiders, you see the Titans, and you see the Cowboys all at the bottom of the list. Necessarily the bottom 3, but I think they were all in the bottom 5. And you just think back to 2 years ago when all of these teams were known for their offensive lines. So I just thought that was funny. But anyhow, back to the game. The Raiders have designated Donald return from IR this week, but likely he's not going to play. And even if it does, it would be his first time back out there since week 4. So I would still like the Steelers' chances there. I also like on Tuitt's matchup against rookie left tackle Colton Miller. I feel like Tuitt should be able to exploit that. Maybe Bud Dupree could even finish a sack here too, but I really like Watt and Hayward's matchup a lot. Brandon Parker is probably the Raiders' worst offensive lineman, and they will be both be lining up on his side. So after 2 straight games of only 1 tackle, look for T.J. Watt to bounce back here. I also like Javon Hargrave one as he's been on fire lately, and the Raiders have allowed pressure from every spot on the line. There's no one spot where I could say, well, yeah, this side is allowing the most, but so I'm looking at him to continue his sack streak. This would be his 4th straight game helping take down the quarterback if he gets a sack or a half a sack in this one. But it's also going to be interesting to see the Steelers opt to use Daney more, with Chicolo being questionable coming in. It was surprised because Chicolo didn't participate in practice for 2 straight days, and it looked like, okay, he's probably not going to play, and then full participation on Friday out of nowhere. I was like, okay. So we'll see how he does, but I love a Daney right now, so I'm going to be watching intently to see when he gets subbed in. But now let's look at the linebackers as a whole. Based on what we saw last week, we're likely to see linebackers match up on the Raiders' offense, the best player that they have, and that's Jared Cook. And at least this time it's more a favorable match, a tight end and not with a wide receiver, but I hope they use LJ Ford the same way, as I think his combination of speed and size works best against Jared Cook, who has always been known to be a faster tight end. That being said, I hope Bostic isn't put on him much because similar to how it worked on the 3rd and 4 last week, I don't like his chances. That's really it for the Raiders offense, though. Jared Cook is all they got. Jared Cook and Derek Carr. I mean, sure, they got a flashy name in Jordy Nelson, but this isn't prime group A Jordy Nelson. This is an older Nelson who has finished games with 0 catches. He even had a game where his only stat was a negative 2-yard rush. I don't worry about him. The Steelers have Hayden to cover. Then if I'm being real with you, I even recognize their backup wide receivers now that Martavis Bryant and Brandon LaFell are gone. It's a bit of an exaggeration, as I know Seth Roberts and Dwayne Harris, but I literally did not know who Marshall Aitman was. And he's listed as their number 2 receiver currently, despite only having 9 catches on 19 targets. I don't know, man. Really, Seth Roberts and Jordy Nelson have identical stats, and neither of them scare me. I didn't think there would be another game that this happened, but Cody Sensabaugh actually has the advantage in this game because their wide receivers are just so bad from injuries. Anyway, there's one more guy to be watching out for on the Raiders, and that's Jalen Richard. He's their second-best pass-catching threat behind Jared Cook, and he actually leads the team in catches, which is pretty sad, but it makes sense. When Carr's under pressure, he uses Richard as his check down a lot. Richard typically isn't dangerous, but he is someone to look out for as he gets a lot of the touches for the Raiders. He still does have 8.1 yards per catch, so I mean that's respectable. But he's not been like I think his longest catch and run is 32 yards on the season, so he's not like super speedy or anything. But speaking of the Raiders running backs, their starter is Doug Martin. He's actually done okay behind a bad offensive line. He's averaging 4.2 yards a carry, and his biggest issue is that he's fumbled twice in the short amount of time he's been a starter. Obviously, Marshawn Lynch was a starter for the beginning of the year, and when he went down, they brought in Doug Martin. But I'm sorry, they had Doug Martin, but then Martin got to be able to be the starter. But it's I'm hoping that the Steelers can exploit that if Martin ends up rushing all over them. And it's a possibility that Martin rushes all over the Steelers. I feel like the Steelers have been more susceptible to the run game than the pass game, despite being ranked 8th in terms of average yards given up in both categories. I mean, we saw them break down against Justin Jackson and Eckler in the second half last week. We saw Fournette go crazy against them. McCaffrey got 3 touchdowns, and so on and so forth. So if the Steelers keep this close, I could see the Raiders trying to rush a lot. But that's the thing. The Raiders haven't typically rushed a lot because they've been going down quick and by a lot. But really, that wraps up the defense for me. The last thing I want to say is I want to see Sean Davis have a bounce-back game. This is a good one to have it, as I already mentioned how most of the Raiders players aren't very good. So if there was a game he could have a solid one, this is it. This would be a good game to get some confidence and play well for Sean Davis because he really needs it after last week. But what do you have to say about the defense going into this game?
Well, I think you had good analysis there. This will be interesting. You know, in one facet, the Steelers have a significant advantage on defense over the Raiders' offense, much like we saw the Steelers' offense over the Raiders' defense, and that is the Steelers' defensive front over the Raiders' offensive line. The Raiders, as you said, have surrendered a ton of sacks, 39 to be exact, and the Steelers have brought down the opposing quarterback a league-best 41 times. An offensive line that, as you said, was once the strength of this team, has quickly become a weakness. Outside of rookie Colton Miller, who has really struggled himself, the Raiders' offensive line has been horrendous and lacks upside too. Even with the Steelers' inconsistent front seven, I think they'll dominate the Raiders' offensive line through in and throughout. And you want to look at things by position group here. Starting with the defensive line, they've been playing really good football when it comes to getting after the quarterback the last few weeks. Stephon Tuitt is a week further removed from his injury. Javon Hargrave has been playing his best football, and Cam Hayward has been putting up a quietly solid season since his early season struggles. They could all have big days in this one. And on the outside, you talked about bounce-back games from Bud Dupree and specifically T.J. Watt. I was proud of Dupree for fighting hard through a torn pectoral muscle last week. And Watt just hasn't been his normal self. I want to see them chipping Jared Cook whenever he's lined up next to the tackles, and I think they can set the edge pretty successfully in this one. And you talked about Ola Adeni. Even though Anthony Chickillo practiced in full this week, I'm hoping we see a little bit more of Adeni in the pass rushing rotation. In his first game back after only practicing for a couple weeks after sitting out on IR for most of the season, I thought he played pretty well. I was not expecting him to have that kind of an impact right away. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that Adeni is a better pass rusher already than Anthony Chickillo is at this point in his career. So maybe that means you can use Adeni a little more situationally than you could have used Chickillo in the past. So I'm hoping to see more from him. And up the middle, I liked what the Steelers did at times in using LJ Fort on defense last week. It's clear that Fort is a better pass defensive kind of guy, while Bostic is a better run support kind of guy. You know, as we saw, Fort struggles against the run, and Bostic is not good in coverage. But the problem is this is a passing league, and you want to be as best prepared for the most possible situations as you can, which I believe means that Fort is going to get more playing time. But of course, that depends on the situation. I want to see a nice even split down the middle with those guys. When looking at the Raiders' ground game, you'll notice that they signed C.J. Anderson. Anderson was a member of the Panthers, whom the Steelers crushed 52-21 earlier this season, but now he'll get his second crack at the Steelers, although I actually don't expect him to play, having been just signed. That would leave a washed-up Doug Martin, who, as you mentioned, is having a decent year, so I guess that might be a little disrespectful, but it is hard to get noticed when you're playing for the Oakland Raiders right now. Jalen Richard is a decent receiving threat and a kind of a scat back in DeAndre Washington, who hasn't been necessarily that impressive. And didn't they all fumble last week?
That I don't know. Did every single running back they had fumble last week? That's impressive.
To my knowledge, all three of them did. That's bad. It's hard to win football games. It's amazing they were within 7 points even after that.
Yeah, and then that's with the Chiefs. Like that was not an easy team to keep up with.
But none of these guys are really concerning to me. If Doug Martin's on the field, I'd be okay with John Bostic and him one-on-one, or Vince Williams instead. And then if it's one of the other guys, Richard or Washington, LJ Fort on him would have to be, or on them rather, would be a win in my mind. The matchup with the receivers, as you said, it's not that worrisome either. Jordy Nelson, he's more of a decent possession receiver at this point in his career. He's not very threatening. Joe Hayden should be fine covering him, or Cody Sensabaugh if need be. Marcel Aitman, Seth Roberts, Dwayne Harris, they're all kind of complimentary guys right now. Harris is more of a return guy too, so he's not really a receiver per se. And as far as Roberts and Aitman go, Roberts, as we know, is more of a secondary receiver. He's never been a game breaker, but he's still an okay complementary piece. And then Aitman has been an interesting player. He doesn't have a lot of on tape right now, but I wasn't sure if you saw, he was James Washington's former running mate at Oklahoma State, a rookie out of Oklahoma State and a 7th-round pick. He's 6'4", and used to play on the other side of him.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's kind of cool.
So Aitman is 6'4", and I'd be shocked if the Raiders didn't take some shots with him. But as we know, the Raiders' best weapon is Jared Cook. The 31-year-old is still getting it done. Did you know, Austin, that Cook has the best receiving games for a tight end for all three franchises he's played for? The Rams, the Packers, and now the Raiders.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've always been a fan of Jared Cook. I've always liked him on every single team he's been on because I like his speed.
I was a fan of Jared Cook from the day he was a free agent. The year before he signed with the Packers, the end of the 2015 going into 2016 season, that was when Heath Miller retired. I wanted Jared Cook, and obviously the Steelers went with Ladarius Green, and we know how that all played out. But anyways, back to the point at hand. I'm hoping the Steelers don't try to bash their heads against the wall and cover Jared Cook with linebackers, because as we saw, if they get in mismatches with great athletes like Keenan Allen, as we saw last week, they're going to lose. I talked about it a little earlier, but I want to see Morgan Burnett. It's looking like he's going to play. I think he has the most experience covering these kinds of athletic tight ends, and he'll have the best shot overall. So I want to see more of that. And just on the whole, the defense is facing an interesting challenge. They should win the battle for the most part, but there are still some things about the Raiders that are difficult to crack. Derek Carr is having a bad year, according to national pundits, but I'd like to point out that he hasn't thrown an interception since Week 5, and his turnovers have all come from the fact that the pocket collapses around him almost instantaneously when he touches the football. So he is playing pretty well. Don't expect many turnovers for the Steelers defense again, if any. That being said, I'd still be disappointed if the Raiders managed to cross the 20-point barrier, just because of how bad their offensive line has been. Do you think the Steelers pick up a turnover in this game? Do they finally get it done?
I think they get a fumble. I don't think they get an interception. I was thinking about that because I saw that Doug Martin has fumbled twice, and you let me know that all three of the backs fumbled last week. That I didn't know. So I feel like they get a turnover that way, but I don't think they get an interception. What do you think?
I'm gonna have to agree with you there. I'm trying to think to myself right now. When was the Steelers' last interception?
I believe it to be No, I have no idea. I don't have a guess. Like, no, I don't have I don't have an interception coming in my mind even. Like, this is very long ago. The last interception I like have in mind is Bud Dupree getting 6 in the Tampa Bay. Obviously, that's not the last one at all. It's just I can't remember the ones in between that and now.
The last one I can remember is Vince Williams' pick 6 against the Panthers.
That might be it. That might have been the last one because that's fairly recent, I suppose.
Relatively speaking, yeah, that was the last Steelers interception. That was the only interception in that game. We know they didn't pick off Blake Bortles because they didn't throw the ball at all in that game. Didn't pick off Case Keenum and not Rivers last week, so no interceptions there. They didn't force any turnovers against the Ravens. I believe Baker Mayfield threw one to Joe Hayden, so you're talking only one interception since the Browns game. The second Browns game, that is. That's bad. That's real bad.
Not a lot of interceptions. Not a good defense for turnovers.
So mind you, that's 5 games, and the one interception they got was, let's be honest, it was kind of gift wrapped to them by Cam Newton.
Yeah, that was terrible. I mean, they should have had one last week, but Sean Davis is that dude, so.
Someone else who is competing to be that dude was Chris Boswell, who missed another PAT last week. Oakland has been a bad place for Steelers kickers in the past. In 2013, Sean Schweischem missed 2 of the 3 field goals he missed that season in one game against the Raiders, and it proved to be enough of a difference in a 21-18 loss. Do you see a turnaround here for Boswell? How is the rest of the special teams playing out here?
I do not see a turnaround for Boswell. It's looking rough for him on the season. I mean, when you have a third worst PAT percentage in the league, it just doesn't look good. But for the rest of the special teams, after a solid week last week, Barry has brought the Steelers all the way up to 22 from, I believe, 28 in terms of yards on, which makes them better than the Raiders who have into the number 28 spot at 43 yards punt. Then when you look at net average, it gets worse for both teams, but the Steelers still beat the Raiders out, with the Steelers averaging 38.4 net yards per punt compared to the Raiders' 31st ranked 37.4 net yards per punt. I would also like to point out the Steelers only have 1 more punt than the Raiders, but have pinned teams inside the 20 11 more times. So obviously the Steelers are better at that, but that could also be the problem of the Raiders not moving very much with the ball. But anyway, moving on to returns, the Raiders have the advantage on kick returns, averaging 22.2 yards per kick return compared to the Steelers' 19.3. And then punt returns, the Steelers are actually tied for 14th place with 8.2 yards returned. But finally, I'm going to wrap this up by comparing the kicker stats. The Steelers are averaging more yards on kickoff than the Raiders, but more average yards, I'm sorry, yeah. But the Raiders have a better field goal percentage, PAT percentage, and a longer field goal than the Steelers do. And at this point, with how Boswell has performed, you're going to basically find most teams have a better field goal and PAT percentage than the Steelers. I mean, things can go bad for another team, but right now there are only 2 teams below the Steelers in PAT percentage. So I'm basically going to be saying that every game until the Steelers lose either in the playoffs or don't make the playoffs. So what do you have to say about special teams?
We know the Raiders' special teams unit has been anything but special this year. Their kicker hasn't been great, Carlson, and as Austin pointed out, they've really lacked in most areas statistically. Another angle to consider is the Ryan Switzer revenge angle. We already mentioned that before, but he's going to be out for blood, and after Danny Smith's unit suffered through another terrible performance that included a missed PAT, more penalties, and a punt return touchdown, I'm actually feeling kind of good about this unit tomorrow. I think Switzer's going to have a couple of long punt returns over 20 yards and 1 kick return over 40 yards. So I'm predicting a big game from the special teams unit. All right, keys to the game. It might be a little different considering the offense has such a wide advantage over the Raiders' defense, but nonetheless, there still have to be keys to win. So what are the keys for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
For offense to allow close to no pressure, Ben and AB can tear this defense apart. We've seen it before. We just can't see a breakdown from the offensive line through this bad pass rushing unit. For defense, it's to take away Jared Cook. I would even go as far as saying double team him. He's usually the most dangerous on the team. It would almost make the Raiders one-dimensional, taking him away. So what are your offensive and defensive keys?
On offense, it's just take what the defense gives you. The Steelers have clear advantages at pretty much every position in this game besides running back versus linebackers, but it might not matter because the offensive line of the Pittsburgh Steelers should be just moving bodies all game long. There's no reason for deep shots all game. There's no reason to try and break every run for 60 yards. If you take what the defense gives you, soon enough the Steelers will force them to cheat a little bit, and when they start to do that, that's when you hit them over the top for big gains. That's when you break them down. So it's not very complicated this week. And on defense, I'll echo your key, Austin, just because of how important he is to the team. Make sure Jared Cook is covered. He's clearly their best option on offense, and Derek Carr has a lot of trust in him. He is his favorite target, especially with Amari Cooper in Dallas now. I stated before I wanted to see Morgan Burnett on Cook for most of the game, but I think as long as the Steelers know where he is, particularly on third down, I think the Steelers will have pretty good success in coverage on him in this game. As far as X factors go, there's a few you could choose. The offensive one, again, it's a unique situation, but
for me, it's going to be Antonio Brown. I've mentioned it a few times now, but AB set career highs at Oakland last time they met, and I don't think he can. I don't think he will recreate that exactly, but I think it will still be a huge game for him. Then for defense, it's going to be TJ Watt. I feel like he's been too quiet these past two games, not having a big game here, especially against a pretty weak opponent. So who are your X factors in this game? Who did you pick on offense and defense?
On offense, I went with Jalen Samuels. He's getting his first quote-unquote start this week. I think he's going to finish with more touches than Stephen Ridley or really any other player on offense. He's probably not going to have more than 10 to 12 carries, but I still think the Steelers try to utilize some plays that we saw Samuels used in at North Carolina State, where he was an H-back and got some shovel passes, some end-arounds. Expect the unexpected with Samuels in the backfield. And then on defense, I've mentioned his name several times already, but Morgan Burnett. Assuming he plays, I am expecting him to be the guy that's one-on-one with Jared Cook for most of the game. He was specifically signed to cover tight ends and to take them away. I think the defensive success for the Steelers in this game depends largely on what he can and cannot do. That should wrap up our preview for the Steelers and Raiders. Let's get into Week 14 of the NFL season by first talking about what happened on Thursday night. The Jacksonville Jaguars' quick hot streak is already over, and the Titans and Derrick Henry just absolutely destroyed them. And Derrick Henry had quite the day. Imagine having him in fantasy football, and there's still going to be people that have him and lose this week.
Yeah, that's going to be me in one of my leagues because I decided I didn't bench him. He had obviously a killer performance, and just terrible for me to bench him at the last second, too. I picked up Jeff Wilson, and it's just very, very. He has 48 points on the bench. But I do want to say, thinking of fantasy football, I want to say one thing to all the guys. We haven't really talked about it in a while, but doing our fantasy football league together with us on the Short and Seal podcast. Congratulations to you all on making the playoffs. We have one more week before playoffs start, but playoffs are set based on everyone's records. And it's going to be Nicholas, who's bad juju. I bleed black and gold, which is Charles. Blackjack 26, which is Ronald, and me. So we're congratulations to everyone besides me that made the playoffs. And I wish you good luck on trying to win this signed jersey. Obviously, we started this at the beginning of the year. So good luck to everyone on that because I just got reminded of fantasy football.
Well, thank you for the update, Austin. I probably should have done more to keep them in the loop, but we are thinking about you, and we appreciate your continued patience, and we hope you've been enjoying the fantasy football year. IDP has certainly been an interesting experience for me. I had some highs and some lows and some losing streaks with my team. Not a great year for me, but it's a learning experience.
Yep. It's definitely a learning experience to get into IDP for the first time. I agree.
So we got through the Thursday night game. The Titans stay alive in the AFC playoff picture. Moving into the 1 o'clock games, Jets at Bills. The Bills absolutely crushed the Jets a few weeks ago in the Meadow. I guess it's not the Meadowlands anymore. In what's the name of that stadium? Why am I blanking on it?
MetLife Stadium.
MetLife, that's right. with Josh Allen back, is there any reason to think the Bills won't cover a 4-point spread?
No, I like the Bills in this one. I'm going to pick them to cover. I don't like the Jets. I don't like Sam Darnold very much so far this year, and I just don't like the Jets. They're falling apart at the seams. Bills cover.
Yeah, they are not a very talented football team. The Bills seem to have new direction and new life with Josh Allen. He seems like their guy. So lay the 4 points for me. The free-falling Carolina Panthers at the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are an improved team, but this is an even line here. I'm not sure where to go. Ever since that Steelers crushing defeat, the Panthers crushing defeat at the hands of the Steelers, they just haven't been the same team. And I think Cam Newton really got himself injured. You remember the play where T.J. Watt absolutely smashed his shoulder and ribs? I think that might have really rung him up. I think that really might have dinged him. I feel like he hasn't played well since then.
I agree with you. I feel like it's really because he had a shoulder injury coming into the Steelers game, and that was the shoulder he already had injured. So like it's just really bad for him that he got hurt there, and I mean, just not good. I mean, I have the Panthers winning still because this is it. The Panthers need to get going. They lost 4 in a row now, and it's just like they can't. If they lose the 5th, they're done. I went over it. I think I just went over it the last podcast, but they versed the Saints twice still, and their only hope is that the Saints in the final week, which I believe they play the final week, the Saints don't have anything to lose, and that they verse like the backups like Taysom Hill and stuff. But right now, the Panthers need to win this game, otherwise they're completely out. So I'm going to pick the Panthers to win here.
Add into the fact that they just lost Greg Olsen for the year too. I'm going to take the Browns to win here. Is Ron Rivera on the hot seat if they lose this game?
I don't think so. I don't find Ron Rivera to be the problem with the Panthers. I feel like their defense is overrated. Not anymore, but I feel like their defense is just not bad. It's a little bit of an older defense. Then I don't know. It's just they need wide receivers help too. Like I feel like this team is just not talented enough. I don't feel like it's the coaching's problem.
I'm not sure. I've heard some people talking about it, and I'm not sure. I'd want to wait till the end of the year. Ask me again in like 4 weeks, and I might have an answer for you. But I'm going to say no right now. But to recap, I'll take the Browns. Austin will take the Panthers. Falcons at Packers. 2 teams in free fall mode. Green Bay is getting 5 at home. Can both of these teams lose?
I wish. I mean, both of these teams coming into this year were, I thought, the most overrated teams. So I would like a tie out of this one, or a loss for both. But I'm going to ultimately pick the Falcons to win. The Packers they're just bad. The Packers are really, really bad. Like they lost to the Cardinals last week, and Cardinals are probably the 3rd worst team in the league, maybe 4th, but regardless, I'm picking the Falcons to win, even though I dislike the Falcons. Who do you got?
I'm actually going to take Green Bay, lay the points, just because they are home. They suffered a disappointing loss last week. I get it, but I just feel like Aaron Rodgers is going to come out slinging it, and he's just going to play his best football of the year now that Mike McCarthy's gone, just as almost like a middle finger to him for no reason whatsoever. So based on that logic alone, which is not very logical, I'm going to pick the Packers, lay the 5 points. An interesting, a sneaky good game. Chiefs and Ravens. Ravens going into Arrowhead. They're 6.5-point dogs. This has the makings of a pretty good one. The Ravens defense can certainly make things interesting. Lamar Jackson facing another questionable defense. I'm still going to take the Chiefs, lay the 6.5, but I'm not super comfortable about it.
I'm going to pick the Ravens plus 6.5. I think the Ravens have the best defense in the league, and I feel like it's going to throw off Mahomes here. And obviously they don't have Kareem Hunt no more, so it's down to Spencer Ware. I feel like the Chiefs are still the better team. I think overall that the Chiefs offense is going to completely outscore the Ravens offense. But I think that the Ravens are going to keep it, get it closer at the end and keep it within 6.5, which we got to hope for, because right now the Steelers only have a game, and we got to hope for the Chiefs to win here. Otherwise, the Steelers are in trouble with the rest of their schedule.
Patriots at Dolphins. New England getting 7.5 on the road. The Dolphins have won 3 of the last 4 matchups in this series in Miami. I think they'll keep it close, but I think New England will come away with the win here. So Dolphins plus 7.5.
I'm gonna have New England thrashing them like when they versed the first time. I like the Dolphins, especially not without Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard has been like their standout guy, and he's not playing. So I'm gonna pick the Patriots to cover here.
Saints at Buccaneers. Week 1 really feels like a long time ago. That was when Ryan Fitzpatrick led the Buccaneers to an improbable 48-40 victory over the Saints. The Saints have become the darlings of the NFL since then and are now getting 9.5 on the road. Any chance they're going to slip up here?
I mean, there's always a chance, but I feel like the Saints are still going to cover here. I feel like they just got the advantage on everywhere. I mean, the Buccaneers don't have that spark anymore. They're not the 3-0 upstart Buccaneers. They're a team heading towards the bottom right now. They're downtrending. So I like the Saints to cover here. What do you got?
I do too. Dirk Cutter is going to get fired after this game. That is what I believe will happen. Give me the Saints to cover this one, win big, and Buccaneers will put themselves out of their own misery here. Oh, one team that is really in the misery right now is the Washington Redskins, down to their 3rd quarterback, Mark Sanchez, hosting the G-Men, the Giants, who clearly are not tanking right now. The Giants seem to be interested in winning, and I think they have a pretty good chance to win this one. They're 3.5-point favorites on the road. I'm not crazy about betting on Eli Manning, but I trust him a lot more than I do Mark Sanchez.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the Giants to cover here only because Mark Sanchez is the starter for the Redskins. I mean, hey, maybe he'll redeem himself and the Redskins will win against a very poor Giants defense that is not very good against the run. Maybe they'll rely on Adrian Peterson to win, but I just don't see it happening. I think the Giants are one of the few times this year the better team, so I'm going to pick the Giants to cover.
Agreed. Giants lay the 3.5. An interesting, compelling game. The Texans have a chance to win their 10th straight. The Colts, who had a pretty good hot streak going, they lost, and now all of a sudden they need a win here to keep their good playoff hopes alive. They're 4.5-point dogs in Houston. That win against the Colts kind of turned things around for the Texans. Can they do it again? Can they beat the Colts again?
Wait, I thought the Colts won the first time. Didn't the Colts win the first time?
I'll check. I could be wrong. It could have been their last loss. That might have been what I was thinking, actually.
Yeah, because I was about to start it off by saying the Colts were the last team to beat Houston, so that just threw me for a. But anyway, regardless, I'll go into it anyway. I still have the Colts winning regardless of whether they lost the first time or not, because I feel like the Texans are not to go into the playoffs with just. What is it? They're on a 9-game win streak right now. If they win this one, so yeah, I don't think that they go into the playoffs without another loss, at least one. I think it comes here. The Colts are fighting for a playoff shot, and I think that the Colts can win. And I think it's going to be close because I feel like the AFC South always keeps it close. I mean, we just saw the Jaguars get blown out, but we'll pretend like that didn't happen. But I'm going to Colts to win. Who you got?
The Colts did lose to the Texans. That was their first win in this winning streak. You might remember that's when Mike Vrabel decided to go for it in overtime on like a 4th and 2 in his own territory.
Vrabel.
Or sorry,
Isn't that the Titans coach?
Not Vrabel. Frank Reich. Sorry.
There we go. Yep. Now I sort of remember.
Yeah, you'll forgive me because Vrabel made stupid decisions this year too, going for 2 in London. So forgive me for mistaking 2 rookie head coaches that made completely blasphemous and idiotic decisions that lost them games. My apologies.
Easily confused. I forgive.
In any case, I'll also take the Colts to win this one. I think they're the more desperate team, and the way I see it is the Texans have to lose one of these games eventually, right? Maybe? We'll see, but I feel good about Andrew Luck in this one. 4 o'clock games now. Bengals at Chargers. Chargers coming off that win over the Steelers on Sunday night. They're back home facing the Bengals, who are in complete freefall mode. They're 14-point underdogs in Los Angeles, which has routinely become the home stadium for the opposing crowd. Is there any chance the Bengals can keep up with them?
I'm going to pick the Bengals to keep within 14, only because I just don't think the Chargers are as good as advertised after last week. I feel like Derwin James is their entire defense. So I'm going to pick the Bengals plus 14. And, I mean, that's I think the Chargers are still going to win by 13. That's what I'm banking on. But, like, the 14 points is just a lot of points to cover by. So I'm going to pick the Bengals plus 14. What do you got?
That is understandable given, the fact that it is such a big spread. I don't know. It's hard for me to believe a team led by Jeff Driscoll can keep the Bengals within a 14-point margin. I don't know. I haven't really seen much of the Bengals since the Steelers last played them, but I'm not. I've jumped off that bandwagon real quickly, and it seems like a weekly thing. We keep texting each other. Remember when the Bengals were leading the AFC North? It really feels like a long time ago. I think this could be hopefully the beginning of the end for Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati. Give me the Chargers. Lay the 14 at home. Denver at San Francisco. Denver getting 3.5 on the road. Nick Mullins getting another start. He's had a quietly decent year, but of course the 49ers have not been a good football team, ravaged by injuries. Can they get the win here?
I actually do think they do. The 49ers are they're looking at a Broncos team that is also decimated right now. They lost Jeff Hireman, lost Chris Harris for at least basically until playoffs if the Broncos make it. So this Broncos team without Chris Harris just seems not very good to me. And they 49ers get Marquise Goodwin back, which is a speed advantage. If Nick Mullins could just throw deep, be accurate on deep throws, I could see the 49ers winning actually easily because of that mismatch. But I'm going to pick the 49ers to win outright. What do you got?
I'll take the Broncos, lay the 3.5. They've had some impressive wins the last couple weeks, and although I think the Niners, as you mentioned, they do have some mismatches coming up, I still think the Broncos are a better football team on the whole, and I think Von Miller's going to have another big day. NFC East showdown, the Cowboys have a chance to realistically clinch the NFC East, with the Eagles really being their only threat right now, having already beaten them earlier this year. Dallas 3.5 points at home. I really wanted to lean Cowboys here because I felt like they are the better team through and throughout, but give me one last bit of the Philly special magic from this past season. I'll take the Eagles to win this one, and this will kind of be my last time believing in the Eagles if they can't win this one.
I'm going to pick Dallas to cover here. I feel like Dallas is their team, and then also I just feel like the Eagles are bad. The Dallas is better, Eagles are bad. That is basically it for me. So I'm going to pick Dallas to cover here.
Lions at Cardinals, a sneaky tank bowl coming up. Detroit getting 2.5 on the road. Both teams' offenses have just not been any good lately.
Yeah, no, I'm going to pick the Detroit to cover because I like Matt Stafford better than Rosen, but like both these teams, I can see it going either way. I feel like Detroit has the better defense as well, so I guess that's what I'm banking off of for Detroit to cover. What do you got?
The veteran quarterback and better defense is certainly understandable. I'm going to make my pick based on home field advantage, so I'll take the Cardinals to win this one straight up. And I'm not really confident in it, but making picks here. Sunday Night Football, LA Rams at the Chicago Bears. This should be a good one, a good test for both teams. The Rams getting 3 points on the road. Mitch Trubisky's going to be back.
Yeah, I'm going to actually pick the win because of that. I feel like they can do it. I feel like the Rams are acceptable, even with Achilles getting a full work this game. I feel like the Bears' defense, I feel like the Bears are being slept on a lot. I feel like the Bears are a very good team, and I feel like they could beat the Rams out here. So I'm going to the Bears to win. What do you got?
I would agree with you from the sense that they can beat the Rams. The Rams seem very beatable. We've been talking about this for almost like a month now, how we feel like they're a beatable football team. The Bears, I could certainly see them going into LA and beating them in the playoffs, but this week I think I'm going to lean the Rams. By the way, it's also a matchup between the two top players for Defensive Player of the Year in Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald. So that's also something to look out for too. Wrapping up the week, Monday Night Football, Vikings at Seahawks, Seattle -3. Kirk Cousins gets another primetime game to potentially win and kind of improve his resume there.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Seattle to win at the end of the day because I just don't like the Vikings. I feel like know what they did against the Patriots, it was just rough. Like, they should have just kept running the ball, and they just refused. So I'm going to pick Seattle to cover here.
Yeah, I have no confidence in the Minnesota Vikings anymore. I've jumped ship, and I do not understand the Vikings' insistence on throwing the ball. They've abandoned the run like no other team in football, and a lot of it, I think, personally, you can disagree with me if you want, Austin. I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. I think part of it is because they paid Kirk Cousins so much money, they want to make it seem like it was a worthwhile investment, and they just keep, throwing the football instead of trying to run the ball.
I really actually don't have a comment on that because, I could see it. I guess I want to try and make it worth it. I've always been a Kirk Cousins hater. I hated that deal because, it was a fully guaranteed deal. It was terrible. It was terrible for a guy that's, always just been, slightly above average. Never like that. I don't know what to make of it, really. I've just always been a Kirk Cousins hater, so I guess I'll leave it at that.
That makes two of us. Would it be? I think it's a fair analogy to call him the Andy Dalton of the NFC.
Yeah. I think he's slightly better than Andy Dalton because he has been better in the past, but still, I feel like that's the best comparison we can come up with.
Agreed, but either way, I'm definitely not sold on him, and I don't think that they're doing good things with him. One team that has not been doing good things as of late is the Green Bay Packers. They finally cut ties with Mike McCarthy, maybe a year too late, but I guess we kind of saw this one coming too. Still kind of shocking nonetheless.
Yeah, it happened 2 hours after the game too. They got done with the game and they're like, yeah, you're fired. But regardless, it was bound to happen. I mean, McCarthy's probably going to have a lot of people to get him because he was pretty good for a while. A lot of people, he still has, I think, the third most wins, Green Bay Packers, as a coach. So he's going to be a hot commodity come the offseason.
There are already reports linking him to the Cleveland Browns. That would be interesting. McCarthy is a Western Pennsylvania boy, by the way. The Bills waived wide receiver Kelvin Benjamin, and he has been picked up by the Kansas City Chiefs, who are now without Sammy Watkins for most likely until the playoffs. What did you make of Benjamin's fit in Buffalo and now his trip to Kansas City?
I just think Benjamin's trash. I think he really is because he blamed his struggles on Cam Newton, and then with the Bills, he blamed on the Bills, and he's just garbage. I think he's not a good player, and he's not putting in the work. When Kelvin Benjamin was drafted, rookie year, I thought he was so dope, and now I was like, you're trash, fam. That's it. What do you think of Kelvin Benjamin?
I completely agree with you. I watched the national championship game. He caught a touchdown pass from Jameis Winston at the very end of the game to win the game for Florida State, and he came out in the NFL draft, and I thought he was going to be the next best thing, and he looked really good for a couple years, and then it just went downhill, and it looks like he doesn't have the correct work ethic you need to be a great player in the NFL, and you already talked about it, blaming other people instead of himself. He just doesn't seem like that great of a teammate, that great of a player that wants to get better, but hey, you know what? He has Patrick Mahomes throwing him the football now. Maybe he will look like a great player, but I'm still not sold on him. Broncos wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders is unfortunately out for the season now. He tore his Achilles. That's a tough break for the Broncos.
Yeah, it just stinks. It was in practice, too. I forgot to even mention that when talking about the 49ers. I knew there was another injury I wanted to mention, but now Cortland Sutton, that second-round pick, he's going to be the premier wide receiver with Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders gone. Can't say I saw that coming into the season, that this was ever going to happen, but you know what? It'd be like that sometimes. So it's going to be interesting to see how Cortland Sutton performs. Cortland Sutton was talked about as like possibly a late first-round pick, but obviously went in the second round. So we'll see what happens.
You mean you didn't see the Broncos being led by Cortland Sutton and Phillip Lindsay at the beginning of the year? I'm shocked.
You make a good point there.
All right, last game of the week, Steelers in Oakland. Pittsburgh is a -10 for what could be the last game in Oakland between these two teams ever. Give me your bold predictions, Austin, then give me your final score prediction, your overall thoughts on the game.
All right, well, TJ Watt is going to have another 3-sack game this game. Then Antonio Brown goes over 200 yards. And then Jalen Samuels has over 8 catches. Those are my bold predictions. Now, for final score, I got the Steelers winning 43-27. I feel like the Raiders will keep it close knowing how the Steelers operate. But ultimately, I think that the Steelers pull away. So I'm going to pick the Steelers to cover. But I feel like it's going to be a close game until the fourth quarter. That's what I'm going to predict. What are your bold predictions and your final score prediction?
I have Jalen Samuels registering 2 explosive 20-yard-plus plays and 2 touchdowns. And I have Morgan Burnett with his first Steelers sack and interception. And then just overall, this game on the whole, we talked about it. I think the Steelers have clear advantages on offense that unless if they turn the ball over 3 to 4 times, which they have done recently, I don't think they should have any problem putting up a ton of points, and I think they will. And on the other side of the ball, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but as long as the offense can get off to a good start, if they can get up by a couple of scores, they should be able to dial in and just really get after Derek Carr. If that if the Steelers go up by 14 points, or if they're up, say 13-0 or 17-3 at halftime, there's no reason they shouldn't win by a huge margin. I'd be really disappointed if the Steelers gave up more than 17 or 20 points here, and if they scored less than like 28. So that being said, I'll take the Steelers to win this one in a total of 34-17. So I think the Steelers win this one with relative ease, all things considered. So that'll wrap things up for this edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast, episode 58 of season 3. Thank you, as always, for joining us. If you like what we do, you have any questions about the show, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you as always for joining me again. And Steeler Nation, have a terrific night. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.